Not gonna lie, after doing my research for this video, I kinda regret getting the symbol of the House Stark emblem tattooed on my arm. But that aside, the Starks of Winterfell were the last kingdom of the First Men to not be conquered by the Andalos. Before the Andal invaders even came over, the Starks actually had a rich history of warring with the entirety of the North. During establishing their, control over the North, they've actually done quite a few shitty things. For instance, over thousands of years, the Kings of Winter wanted to build upon Winterfell, and in doing so, they had to reduce the amount of competitors they had for ruling the North. And during their many conquests, they fought with the likes of House Bolton, House Flint, the Slates, the Umbers, the Glovers, the Fishers, the Riders, the Marsh Kings, the Red Kings, the Blackwoods, the Greenwoods, the Towers, the Ambers, and the Frosts. And one of the feudalistic things the Stark would do after their many battles with the houses in the North is take tribute. They would require their defeated enemies to toss over their women as brides or as prizes. And this can only mean one thing. House Stark is actually a mix of the entire North, and just like the Targaryen kings of old, their blood and seed is shared with many of the houses in Westeros. According to Old Nan, some people think that the Night's King may actually be a Bolton, an Umber, or a Flint, but she herself swears up and down that he was a Stark. Well, according to the information I just shared with you, he was actually most likely a part of all of those northern houses. In this video, I want to discuss the true identity of the Night King, in my opinion, as well as a leak that was sent to me by the same person who informed me of what exactly would be happening in this Crypts of Winterfell teaser. Now, because this source has proven so trustworthy, I'm gonna go ahead and throw up a big fat spoiler warning for all of those of you who do not want to know anything about Game of Thrones Season 8. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Okay, so there are a bunch of rumors that are buzzing ever since Sunday, when Game of Thrones dropped the very first 1.5 minute trailer for Game of Thrones Season 8. Now, one of the biggest rumors that I'm going to address in this video is the one that Sophie Turner has mentioned, and this was actually way back in, I think it was October, but it was at the New York Comic-Con 2018. So she's being interviewed, and I believe she's asked something along the lines of, are you excited for the up-and-coming season? Now, she mentions that yes, she was, and they just recently had filmed something for the up-and-coming season that's not actually related to the season itself, and she kind of wanted to take home her statue from that. Now, she actually exactly mentions that they were filming this promo for Season 8. She mentions how she doesn't really know if she should be talking about it, but she said that's okay because it has nothing to do with actual Season 8, and she said in it, there's kind of this big statue of her. She wanted to take it home to her apartment in New York and put it in her garden. So what ended up happening is that people took that little line of this Season 8 promo has nothing to do with the actual season, and they ran with it. Everyone's now saying that, oh, this is just a teaser, and we really shouldn't focus on this too much. And my response to that is, are you an idiot? Obviously, it has a shit ton to do with Game of Thrones Season 8. What Sophie Turner likely meant when she stated that it doesn't have anything to do with the season is that this actual scene is not in the actual season. Of course, they're teasing Game of Thrones Season 8, so the contents of that teaser trailer are going to tease some kind of element in the up-and-coming season. That's why it's called a fucking teaser. What she likely meant by her statement was that she can say this because she's not giving away an actual spoiler for the up-and-coming season. And since we're talking about statues, another rumor or just sort of theory that has popped up since this teaser trailer broke the internet was that these statues were actually aged up to when the characters were died. Traditionally in the Crypts of Winterfell, the rulers of House Stark, the Kings of Winter, and then the Kings of Winterfell get statues in the crypts, and then their family members usually have tombs that surround their crypt. Ned Stark, when he became the ruler of Winterfell, broke this tradition and gave a statue to his brother and also his sister Lyanna. So a lot of people think that Jon Snow, the current King of Winter, well, I guess he knelt to Dany, so the current Warden of the North is going to continue this tradition and give statues or award statues to all of his siblings. Most likely, this was the basis for that theory that each one of these Stark statues for Arya, Sansa, and Jon Snow are aged up to the point where they die. If you look at Jon Snow's statue, his looks like an older version of him, so people think he's going to rule the North for some time before he actually dies. Sansa's looks the same as the way she is now, so in everyone's opinion, same with for Arya, that means they're going to die before it's all said and done. Now, in my opinion, this theory, or this speculation rather, has zero freaking merit. These statues were supposed to be carved in a feudal era, which means they don't have hammer chisels and all the awesome tools that you would normally use in this day and age to carve a stone statue. So these statues are going to look somewhat like the person person they're based on, but for the most part, it's just going to resemble some of their more prominent features, which for Jon Snow, it's his beard. But getting back on track here and moving on more towards the subject of this video, which is the Night King and all of his goodness and how he relates to this Crypts of Winterfell teaser. Now, I've done several in-depth videos discussing the lineage of the Night King, proposing all different kinds of speculation for about what his true origins may be, so I'm kind of going to glaze over that in this video. Mainly, I just want to focus on how he relates to the Season 8 teaser. One of the biggest sources for information on the Night King is, of course, the novels. Now, when he first appeared on the television show, in his credits list, he was actually listed as the Night King, but then later on that was changed, and none of us really know why. In my opinion, it was changed because it's a pretty big spoiler. If you go into the books and research who the Night King is, you'll know exactly who this Night King is and what his motivation may be. More specifically, in A World of Ice and Fire, according to the most common legend, the Night King is this fellow who lived during the Age of Heroes, pretty much not really that long after the wall itself was completed. He was a pretty fearless dude, and he ended up being named the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Legend has it, this 13th Lord Commander ended up falling in love with a woman who has skin as pale as the moon and eyes as blue as the night, or something to that effect, and basically this is when he lost his shit. He ends up marrying this woman who many of us picture as an other, basically one of the first White Walkers. He marries her and declares himself the king, and subsequently he rules over the Night Fort for 13 years. There's no really telling what in the hell this sick bastard did during his 13 years of reign, but pretty much everyone knows that he was sacrificing to the others and worshipping them as his true god. It wasn't until Brandon the Breaker, who was the king of Winterfell, and Jormund, who was the king beyond the wall, teamed up together, combined their forces, and brought this dude down. After they defeated him, Brandon the Breaker is said to wipe this dude's name from history, which kind of screwed us all over in the long run, because now we don't know who his true identity is. Now, in the novels, when Old Nan is telling Bran the stories of the Night King, she mentions how a lot of people think he could be an Umber or Bolton or a Karstark, whoever, but she thinks that he was a Stark. She also thinks that his name was Brandon and that he was the brother of the King of Winter. Old Nan is actually this ugly woman. She's old and she's toothless, shrunken and wrinkled, and she's almost blind. A lot of the times in the books it's mentioned that she's too weak to climb the stairs and that only has a small amount of hair left on her head. Now you see, here's the thing about Old Nan. Usually every single story she's told Bran Stark has come to fruition one way or another. She's telling Bran these bedtime stories, these stories of old, which mind you, Bran only likes the dark ones, but many of these stories that she tells Bran's come to fruition. For instance, like the Rat Cook, that's basically the events of the Red Wedding, and then most recently at the beginning of season 7 with Arya cooking the Freys and putting them into a pie after the Freys had dishonored them at the Red Wedding. She also tells Bran that the comet that appears in A Clash of Kings means one thing, and that's dragons, and she also mentions how she can smell them, and in my opinion that's exactly what the Red Comet meant, was the rebirth of Daenerys' dragon. But like I mentioned earlier, Old Nan actually tells Bran that the Night King's identity is a true Stark and that he's the brother of the King of Winter. She also thinks that his name may be Brandon. But if you take that into consideration, what we found out earlier, which was that the Night King was destroyed by a King of Winter named Brandon the Breaker when he teamed up with Jormund, a king beyond the wall, why in the hell would whoever their Stark father was at the time, if the Night King is the King of Winter's brother, remember he was taken out by the King of Winter, so if the Night King is Brandon the Breaker's brother, also named Brandon, that wouldn't really make much sense, because why would you have two children named the same name? Are the Stark Kings of Winter anything like Rhaegar Targaryen, who was obsessed with prophecy, who named his children intentionally after Aegon the Conqueror because he thought his children would be the ones to lead everyone through the long night, but then realized that he was wrong, and who he initially consummated the relationship with and decided to have another child and named them that name again because he corrected the prophecy? I don't really know, but just saying that makes me feel like I need to put down the tinfoil. Now, in the novels, Rhaegar Targaryen actually marries Elia Martell first, has children with them, and names his son Aegon. Then sometime during that, obviously if you want more on the War of the Five Kings, go and watch my video on Robert's Rebellion's breakdown, but he ends up having another family with Lyanna Stark, and then names his son, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, almost as if he was correcting his mistake from before. Now, this could be something similar that happened with this Stark King of Winter, who ended up having his son, one became the actual Night's King, one became the King of Winter, and they opposed each other. I kind of feel like this theory would really make more sense in the books, because as of right now in the novels, there's this dude running around known as Young Griff who Tyrion suspects as being the true Aegon that was killed by the Mountain back during Robert's Rebellion. This would be Aegon's son Rhaegar 1.0, if he's actually who he really is. And as of right now, he just landed in the Stormlands. So if everything sort of goes as planned, Daenerys actually fantasizes that if Aegon had survived, she would one day have married him because she's closer in age to him than in Viserys. So some people think that she could end up marrying this fake Aegon, and then together they could try to conquer Westeros. This would of course bring Jon Snow, who will eventually become the King of Winter in the books. I'm pretty sure he's going to become the King of the North rather. But this would make him oppose their forces when they first landed to Westeros. So then you'd have sort of a repeat of Brandon the Breaker versus Brandon the Night's King. I guess I should have followed my advice from earlier to put down the tinfoil pipe. But anyway, continuing on here. When Bran's visiting the Crypts of Winterfell in the books, he looks at their faces, and this is a quote directly taken from the books, but he mentions their faces were stern and strong. And some of them had done terrible things, but they were Starks, every one of them. Bran had known all their tales. He had never feared the Crypts. They were a part of his home and a part of who he was. And he had always known that one day he would lie there too. The main part we got to focus on that quote is the fact that no matter what they had done, they were still Starks and they were still buried there. So even if my little theory is correct here, and that Brandon the Breaker fought against his brother, Brandon the Night's King, and he wiped his name from history, his body is still buried in the Crypts of Winterfell. This, in my opinion, is the evil that's lurking down there. Now, another thing we sort of have to consider when trying to figure out the whole what the mystery of the Crypts are is that according to the Free Folk legend, which are the people north of the Wall, Bael the Bard, actually, a lot of people think Bael the Bard may be the Night's King, but his background is that he disappeared from Winterfell after kidnapping the daughter of one Lord Brandon Stark. Eventually, they reappeared with an infant, a future Lord Stark who ended up taking over. Those same Free Folkers who tell that legend say that the way Bael the Bard and that Stark daughter survived was by living in the Crypts of Winterfell. Also, according to the Testimony of the Mushroom, which was a book written by a court jester who everybody thought to be a little bit dim-witted, so he knows a lot of their secrets because they would basically lay out their murderous acts of treason around him. He mentions that Prince Jacaerys Valerion actually had his dragon lay a clutch of eggs inside the Crypts of Winterfell. If this actually happened, maybe those clutch of dragon eggs are what the Starks fear that are down there. The Starks are ice magic and dragons are fire magic. Fire and ice have to coexist equally. If one gets too powerful, then the other one must rise to defeat it. But enough speculation on what may be down in the Crypts of Winterfell. If there's something that I didn't cover, or if there's something that you think may be the hidden evil down there aside from the Night King, let me know down below in the comment section. Now on to the leaks. Now, just as a precursor, these leaks were sent to me through the DMs over on Twitter, speaking of which, make sure you go follow me, but they were sent to me by the exact same person who predicted the Game of Thrones Season 8 Crypts of Winterfell teaser in and of its entirety. In this leak, the person mentions that in episode 5 is when the Night King gets destroyed for good. After the massive battle sequence, Bran reveals to Jon and Daenerys that they must travel north of the Wall one last time. Bran tells Daenerys that her dragon will know the way. Bran explains that he must go with them as his place is that of winter. They then fly off on the back of Drogon, and apparently there's a bunch of 3 heads of the dragon symbolism. After a while, they arrive at the creation site for the Night King. Bran explains this is where it all begins. This is the altar of winter. He then tells Jon he knows what he must do. Just then, Jon Snow picks up Longclaw and hesitantly runs his sword through Bran, piercing him to the tree. Now, this ending makes a lot more sense if I were to include some of the other main scenes that give this scene more context. But with this person being so correct in their prediction or their leak of how the Crypts of Winterfell teaser goes, I'm sort of hesitant to reveal any more information in this video. But if y'all want me to, let me know down in the comment section and I'll include the rest of the information that I was sent from this person in my next video. Alright, with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please slap a like on this video as the like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed and then make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to all the new people that have been subscribing these past few days. Welcome to the family. Also, super special shout out to every single person watching this video right now. And a special thank you to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Review.